Get ready, because we're going to dive into a little bit of the history and the mystery that is that 1980 Lincoln Mark 6 known as Brandy. So if you've been following my channel for the last couple of years, you probably know about my 1980 Lincoln Mark 6. It's a car that's been featured in a spotlight video. I've done a handful of road trips and kind of working on it videos, and it's been featured in a lot of shorts as well. It's a cool car, very fun car, but there's always been a little bit of mystery about that car. And so I kind of want to use this video to dive into it a little and kind of let you know what I know. So that car has two kind of very unique things that make it stand out from a lot of the Lincolns out there. And if you know anything about Lincolns, one of the big things that you're going to find on most any Lincoln would be a vinyl top. And then when you get into the Continental cars and the Mark series cars, lots and lots of them have opera windows. That's kind of a big thing, those oval windows kind of in the back C-pillar area. And if you know my car at all, it doesn't have those. And that's part of what drew me to the car in the first place. You know, I kind of like hot rods, and vinyl tops don't always scream hot rod. They can if done right, but most Lincolns and vinyl tops are associated with kind of that just grandpa Sunday cruiser. Nothing wrong with that. But so that drew me to it, and originally I had assumed that was done by a previous owner some point in the car's history. You know, hey, they pulled the top off, welded in the window, repainted it, and there was some body work that was showing, made me think that was true. No big deal. But one day, I'm tinkering on the car and just happened to take a look at the cowl area and notice the cowl tag. And this is kind of where the whole mystery started. Is on that cowl tag had a couple unique things. And they said on there that the car was special ordered. It said less opera window, less vinyl top, and less coach lamp. And it even said underneath there, show car. So, naturally now, this raises more questions than answers. You know, this wasn't something that somebody did in the past. This might have been that way. So that's when I started digging into it. I ended up getting the Marty report for the car. You know, those people that have Fords, you know, that's something, you know, there's a lot of history and documentation on a lot of these cars, and you can send them your info and they can send you back a lot of information on the car, which is really cool. I got to kind of learn a lot about the timeline that the car was built in and some of the stuff. But funny thing is, the Marty report showed that car was ordered with a full vinyl top. So now I've got contradicting information here. And I called around, and I actually talked to a couple Lincoln historians, and basically the answer I got was, don't know what you've got there. You might have something, but we don't know what. And one of them suggested that I try to locate the build sheet for the car. After a little digging, I actually did find the build sheet. I was tucked up underneath the passenger seat. Luckily, still very much intact. So that was kind of cool. So here's another piece of the puzzle. And looking through all the orders and things on that also showed that car was slated to be built with a full black vinyl top. But what the build sheet showed that the Marty report didn't was in their notes. Again, it matched the cowl tag. This was a special order car, slated to be built without all that stuff. So a couple things are starting to line up now. Looking at the order for this car as well, it was a fairly early build. The order was received and the car was serialized back in June of '79, and then was eventually built in September, which is still a fairly early car. So looking into more of the order info of the car, the DSO, or the district sales office number, was 84, which, when all that translates out, is a home office reserve order. So this car was ordered as an executive order right from Ford's office in Dearborn. So somebody at Ford requested this car. And I do think that the car spent some time down in Detroit, because it did have a parking pass sticker from the Renaissance building from 1982. And that was still on the window when I bought the car. So that's cool. So the car spent some time down there. So at this point, I knew this car is something special. Somebody that has some level of power wanted the car. So we might have something. And kind of the trail grew a little bit cold for a while. But I did have one day this past summer, I was out on a test drive for some work we were doing at the shop, and I got a call from my boss, and he says, I got somebody here to talk to you about your car. Okay. So, well, I'm on my way back to the shop anyway, so, see if they'll stick around, which they did. So there's a couple guys that stopped in, and they knew more about Lincolns and Marks than I did, which wasn't, I didn't know much. So when I got some cool information from them, they had seen the car around town before and kind of assumed what I did at first, that somebody later in the car's life had removed the top of the window. But again, I showed them that, hey, this is what I found. So they were able to confirm, no, this was a from Ford type of thing. And they let me on a new piece of information that I hadn't known at the time, that my car wasn't the only one that was like that. Up until then, I tried Google searching, finding different photos, and there's just nothing. Just nothing. So I honestly didn't know if any of these other cars, any cars like this, even existed. And so what he had told me was that he knew of two others. One of them was actually special ordered this way, and at some point in the car's life, they actually put the top and the window back in it. So kind of interesting. Obviously, someone had a desire to have the car look more, I guess, original, as you would say, more like the standard Lincoln. But the other one kind of piqued my interest. And he said that car was actually commissioned by William Clay Ford Sr. He was kind of obviously a bigwig at the time, and he liked those cars, but what he told me was that he didn't really care for the vinyl top. So he had ordered a car, and his was a special color, a special blue, had a white interior, and a couple other interesting things about it. They deleted some of the trim, had his in the middle of the steering wheel. My car's got the Lincoln symbol. His had his initials. So there was obviously one very prominent example of a car kind of like mine. That's all it's like. Oh, this is cool. So at least I know that this was something. And, I've talked to some other people since then, and the responses I've got from them is that, we don't know who ordered this car, There's no record of it that I've found at this point. But for somebody to have something like this, you had to have some prominence in the company. What they would do is these cars would actually be running down the line, and they would take the car off the line. Sometimes these were even painted, and take it to the design studio and then make their changes there. And which actually brings back to kind of the body work and stuff that I'd seen, some cracking and things, was because, the various fillers and things they used and the way that they modified these cars back from the factory. So this kind of actually added to that, this was a factory done thing. So everything at this point is kind of added up to, there's still a lot of questions about the car as far as who was it built for? As when it says show car on the tag, what was the meaning of that? Did this car travel around? Was this thing at the auto shows? We don't know. But it is kind of pointing in the direction that, this car, even with the unknowns, is a special car. There might be some importance to this car. So here we are, mid-November, and at this point, that's as much information as I've found out about the car. But here's where our story takes a bit of a turn, because I've actually sold the car. As much as I like the car, I am kind of the guy that can't leave well enough alone. My plan with the car was to modify it. I didn't plan on keeping it stock, but as a builder, I understand that certain cars need to be brought back to a certain style of build. Like a 69 Trans Am, they didn't make a lot of those cars. That's not a car that you cut up and you modify. You restore it back to factory. And even though I don't know a whole lot about exactly who owned the car, there's enough feeling of there might be significance to the car that I felt that somebody might want to retain that originality to the car. And I'm just not that guy. So I sold the car. It is in good hands. I sold it to a collector, and he plans to restore it. Going to take it. Obviously, he's going to dig into the car, figure out more about its history, and hopefully get some answers. And eventually, he plans on restoring the car. He's a kind of a big Ford and Lincoln collector. He's got a lot of significant Lincolns, especially. He's actually the same guy that owns the William Clay Ford Mark VI. So that was kind of cool. And talking with him, I've actually got to see pictures of that car. So kind of neat to see that sister car to the one that I had. So yeah, at this point, like I said, it's been gone now, but I feel it's in good hands. And so we'll hopefully meet up again one day. So might not be seeing a whole lot more of that car on the channel, but we've got some things in store. I've got some things lined up, so we're gonna still have fun. But now, hopefully, you know a little bit more about that car, and who knows, if you have any information, would love to hear it. Just because the car is no longer in my possession, I'm still very much attached to the car, very much interested in knowing as much as I can about it.